Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here for our third and final set of presentations for the year of 2025. I am joined by six incredible artists who have been in my quilt making class, my year-long class. So they are all students who have either graduated just last week or Sharron graduated a year ago. And so we're going to get to hear that perspective of being a year out, as well as these stories of some quilters who've been in the year-long quilt making class for this year. Just a little bit of context is that this is the second year that I've been teaching this class, and it is online. We meet monthly, and all of the students are in small groups. They share presentations, and we get to have kind of a critique, if you will, going around and hearing about each other and sharing about our work. And then there are also online learning modules. There's an online platform where students interact with each other. We have co-working sessions where we get together and sew online, and there are one-on-one pairings that students get to do where I match them up with someone who I think will be either like-minded or maybe opposite in a fun way, and they get to have conversations with each other. And the course is called Quiltmaking, Aesthetics, Curiosity, Efficiency. We talk about a lot of those topics in class, and it was just a real dream of mine to be able to have longer connections with students rather than teaching a 3-day or a 5-day retreat and then not seeing anyone and not getting to see their quilts completed. So it's really a joy for me to get to work with everyone throughout the year and to see lots of quilts getting completed. Another fun aspect of it being online is that it is an international group of people. So right now we have Lisa from New Zealand and Cynthia from France, along with me from Milwaukee. And it's just really amazing to be able to meet with people in that international context in a small group. So thank you everyone who's joining us live here on Zoom. And thank you to everyone watching the recording on YouTube. We will hear first from Cynthia.
Okay. Good. I want to say good evening, good day to you, wherever you are. Um, okay. So, my name is Cynthia. I'm an American. I live in France, and I took part in Heidi's class this year. I had wavered on signing up for it in 2024 and I missed it. And so all year long I thought about, oh, I really wish I had gotten in that class. So I signed up early and I do not regret it. It had an amazing year. So I've been sewing since I was a kid. And then I came back to sewing after I finished my PhD and I was moved to France. And then I started quilting um, basically after my two kids were born. I had been making clothes, but I got into quilting as just another creative outlet. So I've had plenty of online teachers, and I think this class has really helped me. It's really helped me advance as an artist. I mean, I've learned a lot. So what I want to talk about today is a series I did that I'm calling the Sunset Series. This was a picture I took in February of this year. So we had gone down to the Cayman Islands, which is a place that's kind of special for me. It's a family place I've been going to since I was a baby. And so we go always to the same beach. And because I'm on vacation, in the evening, I have the time. I love to go down to the beach and look at the sunset and just like, it's just a moment of tranquility. And so I wanted to capture this in a quilt. So I got home, and the first thing I did was I kind of went through my stash and I did some I guess I was just using what I'd known about improv quilting, using the forms like traditional forms, and I made this quilt. Now, I have not finished it because I made it and then I just had become obsessed with the photograph and the colors in the photograph that I thought, I'm not sure these are the right colors. So I put the photo into Procreate, which is like a drawing application on the iPad, and I picked the colors to see what colors were in that photo. And this is what I came up with for a palette. And this is not a palette that I'm used to working with. But I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. I went through my scraps and I picked colors more in that palette. And then because I was working with scraps, I had to do something else. I couldn't do the blocks I was used to doing. So I just started appliquing them. So I put yellow in the center and I just started appliquing concentrically out from the middle and I was having such a fun time that I filled up this this one it's about half a meter by half a meter. I used an old sleeve muslin that I had used for sewing. So I wanted to make another one, but I wanted to try it on a different color. So I took some gray linen that I had and I did it again and I pieced around. And so all this time, I really liked how I had to slow down. I was able to travel with this piece, do it in different locations. I loved picking the fabrics each time, trying to fit them together. So the process was really a big part of this, of what I enjoyed about this. And then I wanted to get a little bit bigger, see how big I could go. So I found an old bed sheet and I kept going with that pattern with the same fabrics that I had sorted and then I found another piece of this time it was a sheer fabric that I had from a yoga bag. But this one at this point I was kind of done doing that, but it was right at this point that we did module 5, where we learned about working in a series. And it was so I didn't realize when I was doing it, I was doing it because I was just obsessed with the process, but I didn't know that this is something that artists do and that there was a name for it. And so when it came to this module, I was pretty excited because I had my series then. I didn't have to force it. But I was a little bit bored with doing the application. So I got one of Heidi's classes, the framing class, because I was also struggling with what to do with these smaller pieces that I was doing. Sometimes I just don't want to bind them. I don't know why. I was just hesitating with that. And so the framing class was really nice for that. And so I made this piece and I learned about quilt as you go. So you piece it on directly onto the batting, and then half the work is done. And so then you can quilt it how you like, and then and frame it up. And so this was another piece I did with that. And then I had all these scraps left over from the first piece I had done. And I just was loving these colors so much that I did not want any of these scraps to go to waste. So I pieced those all together and I made these two pieces. And then this was another experiment with the same scrap fabrics that I had picked originally. I don't love these, but it was nice just to know that I had kind of hit a whatever. I had gone down a dead end that wasn't totally interesting to me. But because I thought it would be interesting to just use the cell. I love the yellow center and to try and do like a dark light log cabin block with them. They're okay. But I did find an opportunity to do another framed, some small framed one. These are very small. They're like 4 inches by 3 inches frames. So basically, that was my sunset series, and I had to think about, what was I getting out of this? And I guess I was looking for like a calmness of the sunset that it brings me, but also the delight of the color and and the and in some way playing with form, either with traditional quilt blocks or just trying to applicate the scrap pieces as I found them. So I thought I was done. And then I saw another photo of another sunset. I like this one too. And so started a new series, but this time I I had done a little bit of postage stamp patchwork for a quilt at the beginning of the year, and I really loved the effect of that. And also, I just love, again, like the just using tiny scraps in a repetitive way to really have that they to really have like this effect of brightness or darkness. I'm playing with those, and I don't know what I'm going to do with these yet. But what I got a little impatient, and I didn't want to wait. Plus, my sewing machine broke. I didn't want to wait to piece them all together in a big piece. So I just took a couple blocks, put them together to go to just juxtapose the lightness and the darkness, and I'm liking the effect of that. And then once again, there were all these little scraps left. And so I started playing with if I focus more on the dark colors, or if it just was, it's play. I'm having a good time playing with those. This one I just thought, what if I just use a mesh instead of using fabric at all to as the framing part? So like sometimes I have a trouble knowing when to stop. And so I felt very good about this. Like, you know what? I think this little piece is done. I'm just gonna frame it up and that's it. And now I'm taking the even tinier scraps that I really can't sew together. And I've started appliquing again onto some old jeans. And I really am loving the effect of how the colors are coming together again. And I've been using the blanket stitch, which I just find to be, I love the blanket stitch. I think it's so charming. And so yeah, I'm happy with the end of the year that I have this series to share, and I'm looking forward to another year and learning more.
Yeah, Cynthia, I'm so excited that you've decided to join us again in the 2026 group. And that is something that alums can do at a reduced price. So it's pretty easy to be able to continue to join and keep up with the group. We had two people who did that this year, and it was really fun to see them have that experience. Sherry Ramsey shared about that in our previous Zoom that we did. And it's just wonderful to see that whole journey to get to go back to that original photo that sparked you. I know we saw it many months ago, but uh, yeah, I have some family nostalgia for the Cayman Islands as well. Uh, so thank you very, very much for
Yeah.
sharing about that. And yeah, oh, and you were sharing too that you took the framed quilts class that I teach. And that's something as well that students get a 50% discount on all classes like that while they're in the year-long quilt making class. So saying, oh, hey, you might enjoy something in that class isn't such a financial lift for folks who are in quilt making. Okay, over to Lisa. And you'll see everyone is so professional with sharing their screens, but you do not need to be expert at it when you sign up for the class. It's one of many things that these folks have gotten really good at throughout the year. Okay, Lisa, that looks great.
Okay, my name is Lisa Mantia. Let me just see. I'm Canadian and I'm originally from southwestern Ontario, near London, Ontario, but I have lived in New Zealand for over 28 years now. First, I'm going to tell you the background of how I came to quilting and my experience, my level of experience. Secondly, how I came to enroll in Heidi's class and what it has meant for me. And then lastly, I'll share my work that I've done over the year. My background is I did quite a bit of sewing as a teenager. When I say that, my dad had a clothing store, and so I did the minor alterations, like of the jean hems and like taking in waistbands. And also, me and a friend started making drawstring shorts, and we sold them around the school. They were fun, and that lasted for a little while. And then in university, I gained an interest. I did a women's studies degree in anthropology, and one of my classes was an art class. And I came across Judy Chicago's Dinner Party, and I just loved the textiles. I was interested, but I was, a 19 or 20-year-old doing lots of other things, and I did not explore that any further. And then basically I went on a sewing hiatus for the rest of my adult life, having kids and getting a law degree and working. So I did manage to sew a few buttons, but that's about it. Then in 2022, 2020, I began a journey into plant dyes using plants, plants and natural mordants and tannins. So on the screen are a sample of some of the fabrics that I dyed, and they're using things like kutch and madder and logwood and indigo, myrobalan, and some of these are blends of those different dyes. I also experimented with seaweed, which was really fun to do, and used some foraged things like onion skins and acorns. And my idea was to make giant pieces of fabric and sew duvet covers. And this stems back to my teenagehood too, when we used to buy these brilliant calico, like a cotton duvet cover, but they weren't naturally dyed. Anyway, so I went on that journey. I never got my sewing machine out, and I did not sew those duvet covers, but I kept taking the courses. So it was when I was in Australia, in Melbourne, that I met like-minded people who were interested in textiles, that I really found out about stitching and about quilting. And my interest was piqued. I had no knowledge of the sort of quilting that Heidi was doing. I came across her from these friends that I met in Melbourne, and I was like, wow, this is the type of thing that I could do with my fibers, and I'm really interested in creating beautiful things like that. So I went on my own journey without doing any courses, and how do I go back?
Oh, in the bottom left corner of your
Okay.
screen.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it. So this is the first thing that I started stitching together. This is in 2024, before I found out about this course, and I was just using these naturally dyed pieces of fabric that I haven't finished. And I told my class in this class this year, it was very challenging for me because I chose as the back a bed sheet, which was so hard to stitch through. I was like really struggling. So this has been a labor of love, and I do want to finish it. And I think I do want to quilt on top of it, but I just know it's going to be painstaking. But I love the colors of this. And then I found out about Heidi's class. I already knew about Heidi, and I guess I don't know how I found out about the class, but um, I knew that how much I didn't know, and I wanted to expand my knowledge and to be inspired by artists who were working in the quilting world and to develop my skills and also meet people who are like-minded and quilters. I don't know anyone who does this in New Zealand. Um, and then I contacted Heidi because I really am a rookie. Like I'd only done that one stitching piece that I showed you earlier. And she said, well, if you're excited and you have, the time commitment, then you can succeed. You don't need to have like really a huge amount of skills. You can still create something beautiful. And so this year has been it's been amazing learning from Heidi and my other classmates, seeing what they're doing, and then also going off and I have taken the framed quilting class from Heidi. So, and I mean, it was so basic for me. I was learning just how to do those to tie things off. So those are the little tails. I was learning the stitch. I don't know if that's called a whip stitch around the pink bit. So I was really learning the basic things. And I took some other courses too online during the course. And of course, I was inspired by the content of Heidi's classes. This is my first piece after that little framed quilt that I did. And it is, in a way, the start of my journey for this year, which is sort of a transformation. And there's a little text in the middle one. You can see yes, me now. So I was exploring, I guess, composition and placement and using my natural fibers and some repurposed ones. This is a very small piece. I can't even tell you. Maybe it's like 15 or 20 inches by 20 inches. And this is the very first binding I did. And I also took that course from Heidi as well. I got that course and it was so helpful. So this is the binding, which, so forgive me if I'm telling people the most basic things, but I am a rookie and I'm just going to tell you about my journey. This was the first one where I sewed I cut the binding and I ironed it and I stitched it on. So that was pretty revolutionary for me because it really brought the piece together. Then this is, I became a grandmother this year and I wanted to make my grandbaby a quilt. This image on the left-hand side was supposed to be the back of the original quilt that I started with, which is in the next slide. But I loved it so much that I decided to create two different quilts. This one, the front of this one on the left-hand side, that's indigo dyed. I did that in my own vat. And then all of those pieces I also hand dyed over the years. And this is also sort of a study in me just learning very basic things of how to hand piece together scraps of material and then sew them on. And then I really did this, for me, ambitious quilting, which took a long time of these arcs. I mean, I think it looks beautiful. I don't know if I'll be doing it anytime soon again, though. And on the right-hand side is the back, which is, I was in Melbourne with one of the friends that I met in my earlier courses, and we went to some fabric stores, and I said to her my plan that I wanted to make two quilts then. So there's some naturally dyed fibers in there, marigold and cochineal and indigo, but also some bought fabric scraps that were in the bin at the shop. And then the binding is obviously another ironed one, and it's pieced from fabrics that I bought in the Netherlands this year, which just some small pieces I wanted to get because I went to the Netherlands and to Italy and Sicily with my parents on a journey to go to the places where their heritage is. So yeah, that's Lucy's first quilt. This is Lucy's second quilt. The very first top I started making, or front, was the one on the left. I started just making those in 6 squares. I was aware of the small studies that we were going to be doing. And I just put those together, and then I pieced the indigo around it. Yeah, I was really proud that I was able to do that, like the piecing. And I started with indigo actually because I learned, I didn't say this in the last slide, but when I took one of my natural dye courses, it was an indigo course, and it was with Abubakar Fofana, who is really kind of a guru in indigo dyeing, and he's Malayan, and he told us how indigo is it's like a connection between the to the divine, and it's a fabric that newborns in Malayan culture are wrapped in. So I thought, yeah, this is what I'm going to do for my baby. And on the right hand side is just a full piece of fabric with some applique hearts for the back. This is my biggest quilt. This is like a queen size shape quilt. Again, indigo dyed, repurposed fabrics like clothing that has meant something to me. I use this quilt as an opportunity to try out some different techniques again. In particular, the waves that are on that, which is a C and an old shirt. The waves are in relief, like I've pinched the fabric and stitched it, so there's a bit of a texture. This is in progress. It's my breakup quilt, and I have lots to do and work on it. And yeah, the bloom head is flowers from various clothes that I wore during that relationship, some skirts and whatever. So yeah, those are all appliqued separately. This is my transformation. That was my first transformation quilt. This is number 2. This one is the symbolism. They're fish scales and serpents in the water, and they are drawing on various things: transformation, wisdom, healing, renewal of life, and protection. Again, naturally dyed fabrics and repurposed fabrics, and some other bits and pieces that I had bought, scraps of material. I always like to try new things in my quilting, new for me. So I did that effect of the rays, which I embroidered before doing the quilting. And the piece in the right-hand corner, I put that there because I wanted to balance out the blue of the ocean. I don't really know what it is, but I loved doing it. It's, embroidered on top of the whole piece fabric that I used. And this is the first time I did the whole piece binding. So the binding is from the back. And that was cool. And I learned something new too about where I should have left all of my knots on the front and not the back. So those are all snipped carefully around the edges. And this is the last one that I'm working on, Transformation Quilt 3. It's just really intuitive. I decided I wanted to use the central gray piece was made by one of my friends in Melbourne for my dyeing course. And that is eucalyptus and iron. And I used that as a central piece, and then I just built around it. And that's me again. The shape, those last 3 quilts all have the shape of me. My mom and my brother outlined me on a piece of paper, and so those stitchings are me. Yeah, and it's just, this one's in progress, but I hope to have it done by the end of this year. Yeah, and so this class has been wonderful for me. I have met many like-minded people that I love sharing with, and I'm so glad that our small group is going to keep working together. And I just want to say this, like Heidi's content in the modules is amazing, but I personally am going to be spending another year going through it because I've had, I have a very busy job, and I had a lot happening this year with my travel, my grandbaby, some family health issues. So that's wonderful that we can keep the content, we can learn more from it. And yeah, we're going to keep our group and we'll be able to talk about it. So yeah, thank you, Heidi. That's it.
Thank you, Lisa. Um, I mean, this is just such an incredible example of why I love working with beginners. I think that you bring so much imagination and curiosity, and there are things that maybe other folks would be afraid to do with stitching, and you don't know that you should be afraid of it, so you go for it. And it's just really, really beautiful. The figures and the symbolism, and especially your eye with color are so beautiful to get to see in your work. We had a couple questions from the chat. Margaret is wondering if you've ever used Buddleia, butterfly bush, for dyeing.
No, I haven't, but that's interesting. I'm aware of some plants in New Zealand that people use for butterflies. I don't know if it's native to New Zealand though, but I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. And then there's a really lovely message from Claire, who's in the class, and she shared in one of the earlier presentations that we did this year. And she's just reminiscing about you being her first one-on-one pairing and how incredible it is to see where your work's gone throughout the year. Um, and then a couple things that you brought up in the presentation are that your group is planning to continue to meet into the future. And I love nudging and nurturing that. And you'll get to hear a little bit more from Sharron about that in more of a past tense point of view. But the modules are meant to be rich and to have a lot of rabbit holes that you go down. So, for example, I'll include one video in it, but it's the tip of an iceberg from PBS or a YouTube channel or a college's resources or a museum's free resources. And so then there's so many places that you can continue to explore those. And by continuing to meet in your small group at the usual time that you're used to, just without me, you're able to have a little bit more of that accountability to keep going after class. And that's one of the reasons why, if folks are on the fence, do I go for it this year, or do I wait another year till I'm in some way more ready for class? I feel like go for it now, because you continue to have so much support and access to things and this community later. So I'm really excited to see how you all are able to support each other and keep researching and sewing in the coming year. So anyways, Lisa, thank you very much. And on to Michelle.
Hello. I'm sharing from an iPad, so it's a little bit different.
You've been very skillful at it, though. Only the bravest join class from an iPad.
It's a thing. Okay. Oh, I need to go back a slide. So hi, I am Michelle VanderHouwen. This is a detail shot of one of my quilts. So this is like kind of a little slide of what I was doing before this class. I have a degree in costume design. I've been sewing forever. I've been arting forever. But things didn't, they were pretty, but they weren't necessarily me. And I couldn't really put my finger on why, which is why I signed up. I initially found Zach. This quilt was done in 2020, or was begun, mostly done in 2024. It's from Zach's Destroy This Quilt prompts from the Nook. I I found the Nook and I felt like, okay, this is home. This is where my crazy is going to fit in, I think. And Started inspired by him, started really finding vintage fabrics, old, like the more character fabrics had, the better. Still witchy, but in a new direction. And then through Zach, I found Heidi. And then the real self-discovery as an artist began through this class. One of our first challenges that we did was to dig into our aesthetic. I think it was February. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. And so as a theater artist, and then I was a muralist for many, many years, and I've always operated within other people's aesthetics. So I'm very good at mimicking, and I would shape shift my work to fit other people's aesthetics in many different ways. I was, doing cartoon murals or fine art reproductions, or I just illustrated this cocktail book with sort of, early 20th century illustration style. All wonderful, but not me. And so, yeah, this is what this has been about. So in this early aesthetics unit, which was probably the most transformational for me, just looking at my Pinterest boards, this is straight from my presentation from that month. Just finding that all this color was showing up for me, and these kind of wobbly lines. So this is the Destroy This Quilt was the first quilt I started. This is the second quilt. So I'm really new to quilting. This was also begun in 2024 at a Nook retreat at one of the huddles. And Zach couldn't have set up a more intuitive, wild, artistic environment for us. And so this came out of that. It's still not quite done. There's a lot of like experimenting and pulling this thing out, and does that work? And every couple months I take it out again and play with it a little bit more. But this is sort of explosion of the true Michelle on a piece of fabric, and it's been a world like 180 degrees from where I started. Okay, so then this year, 2025, did Heidi's vignettes pattern, and again, so much color. That pattern asks for really interesting fabrics, and so I was able to pull out lots of little bits and pieces that were really special to me and put them together. Lots of those things were very rectangular, square, and so looking back on this quilt, there's a lot of, compared to my other work, there's a lot of straight lines, and my favorite parts of it are the spots where the straight lines are broken by something. So by these little circles or circular quilting or really mishmashed, the lines are very wobbly, that kind of stuff. So all these like little tidbits really have been so informative, and it's really nice to have Heidi there going, look at that, noticing things that we might not have noticed at the time. Again, so I'm mentioning Zach in the Nook a lot, and I've been kind of like riding this funny line in between. So I'm doing a lot of Zach's challenges, sort of guided through them by Heidi. So it's been really fascinating for me. This was the quilt race challenge on the Nook. It started its life as a quilt race quilt. Started as just a bunch of bottles on the backing. If anybody has questions about what that was all about, let me know. It turned into a very political statement, and I did not see that coming, but I've noticed that the more I am intuitive about things, the more I'm not planning, the more powerful my work tends to be. I don't think, that just seems to be what works for me. So this one is all about memories of my mom. She died about 6 years ago, and I'm still working through all of that nonsense, of course. I started by embroidering all these little things to applique, so my beginning were a pile of little embroideries, a palette of fabrics, and a list of things I wanted to include. I tried drawing things on Procreate on my iPad. I had plans. That is not what happened. When I finally took all the pieces of the fabric out to put them together, I was at sort of a little self-made retreat with a couple of friends, and I just started sewing things together. And I really, really, really am loving where this is going. And it's very much me. Like, I think this is the most me of any of the things I've done yet. And some of those plans have followed, I've followed through with some things that were on the list of things I wanted to include. Some are different. Some, I found a piece of fabric that's just absolutely a perfect memory of my mother, like this little yellow telephone. Was not intended to be included, but it was too good to leave off. So it's haphazard, and I love it that way. So that's just a quilt top. That's still a whip. This is also, or these are also in that category. I was trying to get a lot of smaller quilts. These are probably 30-inch squares, ready for a show. Did not happen, but I think I did these 3. The little things in the corner are like little needle books, but the other 3, I did very quickly. I probably put all 3 of those together in like a day and a half. The tops, just the piecing of the fabric. No plans, totally improvisational, absolutely loved it. Had so much fun doing it. And then, I set to aside and started to focus more on the first one, and it's becoming a little feminist, and I love that about it. I never thought I was going to be making political or statement quilts, and they're coming out, so something's happening. So these are back to that first, or not the first, but the early unit about our aesthetics. And so it's just really interesting to see how what I was bringing to what I was showing up with in that unit is really where my quilts have gone. And looking back on some of the things that I said, like this wild color, but through a looking glass. And then here, these like little bits of interest, like sea glass or on a beach, or jewels in an old dusty box. That stuff is really, really following through. And I wasn't necessarily meaning for it to fall through. It's been a natural pattern that's really fun to have that perspective on. So this is this newest quilt, or this is my mom's quilt that I find to be the most me quilt that I'm working on. And this is a little bit of a page from that unit. And the correlation is just so strong, and I love it so much. So thank you, Heidi. It was so fun to put that slide together. And then this is just a collection of all the things this year. And there's so much movement and so much color and joy. And I'm really proud of myself. There's a long way to go, but I have come a long way. So there you go. And then, so from that first slide where this is what my Instagram used to look like, and this is now what my Instagram looks like now. And it's a very, very different place. So this just a little bit from another one of the units is about writing and about putting your artist statement together and stuff. And so this is just a little bit of that artist statement. So I'm just going to read you one of those paragraphs, and that's it for me. So I find my materials on thrift store hangers and in estate sale boxes. I tear fabric, scramble my stitch styles, and distress with dyes and decolorants. I create depth by placing aged fabrics next to vibrantly colorful ones, by contrasting perfect needlework with primitive stitching, and by hiding miniature treasures among giant color blocks. I hope that my quilts are like hidden picture books full of stories. Well, that's where I am. And I'm really, really, really glad that I took this course. And I'd love to be available to anyone who has any more questions if they want to contact me.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I'll help you stop sharing from your iPad, because I know that.
So it's just like the little frosty things don't show up.
Yeah.
Funny.
It's so wonderful to hear you talking about finding your own personal style instead of being able to do things that you know will replicate or please someone or fit an assignment. I remember even when I graduated from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I kind of wished that someone would just give me an assignment and tell me, if you follow this part of your work, you can have a career or you can, and there's no one else who will do that for you. It's you who has to figure out what you want your life's work as within the creative realm to be. And so I love that there's so many steps in this class that are helpful in figuring out what you want your work to be and what techniques spark joy for you, what you actually physically enjoy making and bringing into the world, and then also what your eye is drawn to when you're looking at things. I love sharing the idea that if you walk into a room with 100 quilts in it, would yours be among your 10 or 25 favorite quilts in the room? And it's nice to try to strive to be making the types of things that naturally catch your eye. And I know when in my earlier days, I wasn't doing that. I was making very tidy, precise, clean looking things. And then my eye was drawn to the opposite kind of work. And it's been really fun to push myself to bridge that gap and to become a maker of quilts that I really am drawn to and excited about. And then I also just love that you shared a little bit about exhibiting it. Every year at the end of the year, I'm just blown away that within a year, so many students are talking about exhibiting or artist residencies or selling their work or other ways that they're getting their work out there into the world so quickly. And I think just sharing in class about how that happens. I remember for me, it was very mysterious. Like, how does one have an exhibition? How does that begin to happen? And so being able to unpack that for students and have it be something that makes sense and is achievable, it is awesome to see that happening. And I know you said that some of your show didn't quite come together, but I also saw your quilts on a wall with a band performing.
Yes.
Some
of them were up.
Yeah.
Those little ones didn't make it.
It totally happened.
Didn't make it to be finished. They would have been in had I. Yeah.
You exhibited a few less things that you needed.
Yes, I was not realistic about how long those were going to take me.
But so awesome to get to see you doing that.
Thank you.
And yeah, there's so many wonderful comments in the chat, so you'll have to make sure you take a look at that. And everyone who's here with us today, thank you so much for being here. I love getting to see so many of your videos in the background, paying attention. Okay, our next presenter is Alison.
Unmute. Hi, my name is Alison Hutt, and I live in Muskego, Wisconsin, which is not too far from Milwaukee. I am a retired high school science teacher, and this class was my first serious foray into quilting, though I'd been involved in other textile work before that. I was really inspired by the quilts of Heidi Parkes and Zach Foster. Their quilts were the first ones that made me say, hey, quilts can look like that, as in different than everything else. And I loved it. And my interest in improv quilts, over the exactness of all the piecing, it seems to be, for me, less of a creative hurdle to overcome. And I can just get on to putting the quilt together. And that's worked well for me. I took this class for several reasons: to develop a more regular creative practice for myself, to take my creative work more seriously, to give myself some accountability and soft deadlines, and that is very nicely done in this class, to explore quilts as textile art, and to learn at the hands of a textile and quilt artist, as well as to be amongst them. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that I'd done in the class, as well as some of the things that I did get out of the class. This is a quilt top that I finished early in the class. It is the story quilt. I had taken Heidi's creative bug class on story quilt, where there's a series of prompts. And so what has filled this quilt is my response to those prompts. It is a whole cloth on cotton muslin with repurposed fabrics, using a variety of techniques like applique, making yo-yos, some borrow stitching, and some embroidery. And what I love about this piece is the first thing you see is kind of the bigger, bolder shapes and colors that stand out. But then as you uh, there are also some more receding elements, especially in embroidery, that kind of draws you in and has you inspect what's going on a little bit further. I really love the movement that's happening over toward the right, the embroidery onto the yo-yos. That stands out to me. This is what I call a contemplation quilt. It is entirely quilted, but the binding has not been added to it yet. This is taken or inspired by the work of Emma Freeman, who makes contemplation cloths, which are cloths that are filled with simple running stitches. It is a work or a practice that invites simplicity, rhythm, and repetition. It's a meditative work that focuses on not just the running of your hands or the work of your hands, but processing and reflection internally. And she says, Emma Freeman says that these cloths will hold our energy and become a gentle and soft witness to what is happening inside. And I found that to be true for me. This is pieced denim, roughly pieced, to create kind of a whole cloth background. And then the stitching is done with sashiko thread from anywhere from white through different shades of indigo. I made this. This was the second piece that I took on to kind of take a pause in the class. At the beginning of the class, there was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of things firing up. And I just kind of needed to take a step back and relax and redirect what direction I wanted to go, rather than just grabbing onto the next thing I saw that I wanted to do. And that worked for me. And I really love this work. It was not, the only thing planned was the horizontal stitches. But they weren't measured. They just came as they came. And I really love what arose from this quilt, the ebb and flow, and the patterns of the stitches. And the differences I got a little impromptu about which thread colors. I started off with white, and I wanted to do kind of a gradient, but by the end I was just kind of grabbing the next thread that came to hand. And I love how that turned out. Also, you'll see that there are my exposed knots on there to provide extra texture and to show that this was work done by hand. These are a few more pictures, a close-up of the stitching, as well as the back. I just had some flannel that I backed this with, and you can see the stitching standing out on the back. The third piece that I worked on, I took Heidi's diary quilt class that was offered in the fall, focusing on manifesting and spell casting. And this is a mildly pieced denim, still kind of presenting as a whole cloth, and then applique onto it using, again, repurposed fabrics and sashiko thread. That's kind of my go-to right now. This quilt, so in this quilt, I was really trying to invite things into my quilting work as well as my own personal interwork. Um, I have some images on here that relate to these things, like the moon in the upper left, which is something that illuminates what is hidden in the dark. The white figure in the center right is an archetype image of the sorceress, who is to serve as a guide to the underworld. I traced and appliqued my hands on there to as they do the work of making the unseen seen. I also have my feet traced and appliqued on there to remind myself to stand firmly in who I am as a quilter and as a person as I walk this journey through the underworld. This quilt began as just the upper denim piece, but kept asking to be added to. That embroidery band through the lower center was from the pant legs of some purchased jeans that I had. And it kind of created a grounding piece for everything. Everything else was kind of up in the air, and I felt like that really kind of grounded everything. And then the lower dotted denim at the bottom, it just kept wanting to get longer. And at first, and my intention for that area is to quilt with some stitches that will look more like roots from a tree going down, or like mycelium from fungus. Again, kind of the grounding thing. But now, as I sit back and look at this piece, which is still, this is the quilt top, it's still an unfinished object, but it's getting closer. But now I kind of see that extension that kept wanting to happen as the underworld seeking to make itself known. I really like that long orientation, the falling stars, and with the grounding elements at the bottom, kind of keep bringing your eye down, bringing you down into shadow or into that work that needs to be illuminated. Um, what I learned from the class, these are some things that relate to what I went in for. I found that I was a really slow worker, and I am okay with that, and I embrace that. And also the process of making creative stuff happen is always a struggle for me. And I have, through this, especially over the span of a year, um, I've been able to kind of really meet this demon head on, and I found some things that work for me. Silent working time as the core of my quilt work really helps. Having those silent working times as appointments on my calendar several times a week, so that I just return to my quilting space during that time and work for a set period of time, that really helps. As well as co-working, if I am usually virtually, if I am working with other people, which may or may not be quilting, but we're sitting down for that time and doing this work for that time, that also really helps me constantly come back to my work. And through this year, I have found that my work is really an intuitive one, kind of existing at the intersection of my own internal shadow work and the external textiles that come to me in my life. What I have loved about this class is that I have some skills, tools, and knowledge to prepare me for where my work takes me in the future as a textile artist, whether it remains in the private space or enters on into a more public forum. Heidi has created a class that is structured and welcoming to all types and experiences of quilters, as you have seen from the variety of participants here today. And the opportunity to interact with, to learn from, and connect to other quilt artists, which I consider kindred spirits. I will take these connections and conversations forward with me in my quilt making journey. And thank you very much, Heidi, for this opportunity this year and today.
Alison, thank you very much. I just love that you shared with everyone. I know that like finding the way of working that works for you is like so important. It brings joy to the practice. And so I love that you were able to share, especially at the end, about embracing that slower pace and the quiet and knowing that a co-working session or that scheduled time as an appointment in your calendar is the best way for you to sit down and sew and really enjoy and treasure that practice. Um, I've also seen research be such an important part of your work, looking at Emma Freeman, but also your exploration of the fiber shed and repurposing and thinking about the waste and like that full life cycle of fabric and quilting. Even your photographs where you are photographing things outside where we can see the nature behind them, I feel like is amplifying and reflecting that aesthetic and that sense of purpose that is showing up throughout your work. And, especially thinking about the class and that title, Aesthetics, Curiosity, Efficiency. Efficiency doesn't necessarily mean making 30 quilts in a year. It means sitting down and being able to know what to make and feeling confident and not like noodling around in the studio for 3 hours and having nothing to show for yourself at the end of that time. That it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of people. And so seeing efficiency show up as like 3 really dedicated, thoughtful, contemplative quilts that you're making in a year is so beautiful and so exciting to me. And again, especially getting to be part of your journey as a beginner where you discovered quilts from me and Zach Foster and then took the creative bug class and then decided to really take a big chance on a class that requires a lot of commitment early in your journey as a quilter, I think is very, very exciting and awesome to get to see how that's feeling for you now at the end of the year. So over to Sharron, and then we'll hear from Dianna last.
All right. Um, so I did this class in 2024. I live in Longmont, Colorado, and I'm just really going to be looking at the what it's been like afterwards, I think. Um, oh, I love it. It doesn't want to go on. Okay, so back to the beginning. When I decided to take this class, I had done a couple classes with Heidi. These don't look like the other quilts that people made in her classes, but the one on the left was a diary quilt, and I did it as the it represented all the places I had lived in my life and the length of there was a strip for every year, and the length of the strips was related to the latitude of where I had lived. And the color, it was light when it was really hard times. It includes like the birth of my children. When my husband left, I put Greg left in Braille so that it wasn't obvious, I wasn't sharing, I don't know, unhappy things necessarily that freely. But it was very meaningful for me to make it and to review my life and thinking about what the really important events had been. And then the one on the right was a vignettes quilt that I had made, another class I did with Heidi. And these were probably the third and fourth quilts I made. The first two were very small. One of them was also a Heidi Parkes class with the Makery. And then I maybe made one more before I signed up. So I decided to take quilt making when it was first offered, but I was going to wait a year because it was expensive. But then I reevaluated the importance of stitching in my life and my desire to dedicate time and resources to developing my art practice and decided to go ahead. And I had no regrets. It was just a great decision. And I'm really glad I didn't wait because it had such an impact on me. So, quilt making, taking the class, built community. in about February of the first year, after going to QuiltCon and meeting some people in person, um, I started offering a weekly Zoom for it was mostly originally going to be for my cohort that met on Tuesdays, but then some of the Monday people wanted to come too, and then sometimes the Sunday people would come. And so for almost 2 years, we've been meeting weekly at 4 p.m. Eastern on Zoom. And the Zoom link is in my Quiltmaking online studio. And anybody who's a current student or an alum is welcome to come. You can drop in when it works. You can come every week if that works for you, but you don't have to. And we just sit and we stitch for an hour or two, and we leave when we need to go do other things. We don't come when we have to do other things. And it's a lot of fun just to catch up and see what people are working on. The other community that's really important is Heidi's monthly co-working sessions. And as an alum, you can continue to come to those. So you get to see your old friends and you get to make new friends, and you all sit and you stitch once or twice a month. That's lovely. In addition, Sherry Ramsey was in my class, and it turns out she only lives 20 minutes away from me. So we get together, not quite weekly, but we would get together weekly as long as nobody's sick and nobody's traveling and things like that. And so that's been really fun. And then I've joined 2 textile artist crit groups where we present our work monthly and give feedback. And one of those is mostly people from Heidi's class. It's a Nook cohort that Amanda Natick runs. And then the other one is people outside of Heidi's class. But it's still, these are really useful because you have this meeting and you want to have something finished and you're going to present it and talk about it. And sometimes you get really good ideas on what you could do next if you're a little bit stuck, or what's working and what you want to take into account the next time. So that's fun. So I went to, this was Heidi's opening at the Wisconsin Quilt Museum. And this is a picture of me and Heidi in front of a quilt where I had sent her a piece of fabric that I got from my aunt's amazing textile collection. She was a textile artist who has had to really downsize and is in memory care now. And when I saw this piece of linen, I thought, oh, Heidi uses these colors. And so I sent it to her, and that's what it became, which was really exciting. And then the other picture is Sherry Ramsey that I get together pretty often with, but I had never met her until we went to in person, even though she lived 20 minutes away, which is terrible, but until we went to this opening. And this is co-working in person at Heidi's the night before the opening. This is a group at QuiltCon last year. More people from my class. Okay, and then so in addition to community, I think quilt making made me brave. I contacted other artists in ways I would never have done before taking a class, partly because of the one-on-ones and just talking and sharing and appreciating people's work and wanting to learn more about their process. Now, Heidi, I think you all know, is very generous and encouraging, and she's very open about her process, and we see her working on things. It's lovely. So she was the first example of that and being brave. And then Judith Martin was my quilt hero, and I gave a presentation in one unit about Judith Martin and her work and her process and her thoughts and her life. And then I sent it to her. And so we started this email correspondence, and it ended up with me going up to her opening in Ontario in July or August of this summer. And I got to go to her birthday dinner, and she's just such a sweet, lovely woman. She's a little bit farther along in life than I am, and I hope to age as well as she is. She's just wonderful. And I think her work is so organic and creative and simple and has so many stitches. It's just wonderful. So that was a good, I was brave and I contacted her and it worked out well. Laura Brown was a student the same year I was, but she was in a different day. But I have had an ongoing relationship with her. I reached out, and I every once in a while say, hey, does that need a home? And some of her work has come to my house. And I went to an opening. Well, it wasn't an opening. I went to see her exhibition, which was north of Detroit, where she lives. And she's already had a solo exhibition, which I think is So amazing, but well deserved. And these are a couple of her quilts just showing, you can tell I am really drawn to rather overdone, extensive, wonderful texture and quilting. And then Ben Millett was another student in my group, and his sense of color and precision was really inspiring. And so I talked to him, and I actually purchased this beautiful teal and plum color study that he did. And then I just found some videos that Pat Polly had done, and she prints on fabric and makes just the wildest fabric and then cuts it up and makes these very outrageous, beautiful quilts. And so I contacted her and ended up taking a class with her. Um, it also gave me the courage to use the special fabrics. I have a large collection of vintage Japanese fabrics. Typically, they were clothing. They may have gone through other uses too, because they're very good about reusing things as it gets worn out. They may cut it into strips and make something, or they may take the clothing and make like futon covers that they slept on. But this was a jacket that I took apart and used all the pieces in and made a quilt. It was during Heidi's abstraction diary quilt making last spring. And I just love the fades from the indigo. And it also used the Hundertwasser's idea of 5 skins. You have your epidermis, your clothing, your house, your social identity, and then the bigger world around you. And so it has things that represent each of those in the quilt. But it was using a fabric that I think before the class I would not have had the nerve to start manipulating it and turning it into a quilt. And that was really nice. This is the back of the quilt, and this is me holding it out at a friend's house to get a nice picture in the sunshine. The quilt on the left here is one made with fabrics. The first quilt I made with fabrics that I dyed. Also something that's a bit much to start cutting up the very first time, but it was fun. And the one on the right is made with an old hand-dyed Indian silk shawl. And I just folded it over, put some velvet at the bottom, and then quilted it like crazy. And that was really fun. These are the two things that are on the wall now. The one on the left is vintage Sarasa from Japan. It was a special print, sort of like Indian calicos, but they're usually browns and greens with a little bit of red. And my aunt really loves them, so I'm going to make this sort of log cabin-ish, courthouse steps-ish. But I'm going to have some white around the actual old vintage pieces, partly so the selvage can show, and so you can see all of the fade patterns, which I think are really interesting. The piece on the right is just, I just put this together in studio as a kind of a thought experiment of where I'm going to go with it. But it's a bunch of antique, very old Japanese indigo dyed fabrics. And I'm going to make, again, probably in a fairly log cabin, simple pattern, and then have fun quilting on it. This is a poly fabric that I saw on her website. I was like, that would be the best baby quilt ever. Well, I finished it. It was really fun. It's very wild colors for me because I mostly use blue and white, but I had a lot of fun, and I do what I call scribble quilting on it, where you just go all these different directions and it's dense and it's very enjoyable to do. But now I have this really wild baby quilt, and I'm not sure exactly what baby I would say, here, this baby needs a wild quilt. Cursing the child to a lifetime of high activity. I don't know. So I still have it, and if somebody falls in love with it, their baby will get it. This is the back of that, which it's Japanese double gauze, so it had a lot of texture anyway. And you can see in these little kite tails, they are not quilted. That's just the double gauze texture. But so that was a little experiment, and it was fun. This is what I'm working on right now. It's mostly poly dyed fabrics, also in rather bright colors for Sharron. But the blue and light pink ones are ones that I dyed. So I'm making a gradual transition into using fabrics that I dyed at the Pat Poly class. And that's a lot of fun. It also will be fairly extensively quilted, not quite as much as the kite strings quilt that was I showed you earlier. And then these are some fabrics that I printed at that class that I am not using yet, but planning to. Just it's more being brave and experimenting and learning and with ideas, with colors, and with processes. I really like these. These are in my usual colors. They'll go together eventually. And they're just all different and all fun. And I will wait until I know what that piece wants to be, but then I'm going to feel free to use it because I'm brave. I like this one's just really subtle and I may just use this and do a log cabin out of it. Or I could do a whole cloth. It would be an awful lot of fun just to stitch on. These are well outside my normal color range, but I love the way the patterns of the monoprints and the stenciling comes through. The piece on the lower left is not the same one, but it's it's on the same bigger piece, but it's the back. And it's really interesting how it's a little bit more subtle and you can see all these lovely colors there in that part. These are really bright. I probably won't make a whole quilt out of this, but they're fun to have as a little edge or something in another thing I make. Another part of being brave, last year at the end of doing quilt making, I applied to QuiltCon just so I would have the experience of doing it. And I joined the QuiltCon Rejects Club. But this year I applied again and these two pieces got in. And I feel like these are important quilts for me. I felt that even before I got in there, but these are really reflecting my aesthetic of joy and peace. And these are a different kind of protest quilt. These are the world may be a mess, but we can make beauty and we can remind people about joy. And that's the sort of protest quilt I make. Um, and quilt making made me wiser. It made me more aware that there's just a limited amount of time, a limited amount of resources, and I have a limited amount of energy. So I need to be using those things wisely and well and make good decisions. And I feel much more prepared to choose the quilts that matter. So I'm playing a bit with that poly fabric, but I am gaining skills that are going to let me use my fabric to make even better quilts. So part of this being wiser, I'm 65. I want to finish well. I want to be intentional about how I use this one precious life. I want to make art that matters. I want to encourage the people in my life, family, friends, fellow artists. If a quilt speaks to somebody, I'll probably send it to them. They'll give it a good home and they'll appreciate it. If fabric reminds me of someone or makes me wonder what they would do with it, I send it to them. When I love another artist's piece, I let them know, and I might even buy it for my own tiny little collection. So send them art, send them fabric, buy their art, take the trip to see their exhibition. So the aftermath for me has been community, creativity, and courage. And I thank Heidi and all my fellow students. And I encourage anybody who's thinking about it to do it. You won't be sorry.
Oh, Sharron, thank you so much. It's so exciting to see you a year out and just, really honing your creative voice even more. And you've just stayed so connected to the group. I feel like this isn't a gigantic surprise from a year ago. I've gotten to see you a lot this year in person and online in our co-working sessions, following you on Instagram and seeing that space grow. I've also gotten to see Laura Brown on Instagram. Her account is just blowing up with her new work. And, class was spacious enough that she could share with us about her knitting and her work with ceramics. And that part of her work has been growing so much lately. And I love what you shared. I love how you have these three new words. It just, reminds me of the way that I titled the class. And thank you for taking us all the way back to before you signed up for class initially, and that inner debate of, is this class worth the cost? And I know for me, when I was figuring out what I wanted to give to students and what felt appropriate to charge, I thought a lot about my experience in having taken a yoga teacher training, and those were always $3,000 classes, and they were completely life-changing classes. There's Heidi before yoga teacher training and after yoga teacher training. And it was really my hope to be able to have this be a transformational class in a similar way. And that, that commitment to each other and to showing up and to really doing hard work. I just gave everyone their graduation certificate last week, and I feel so proud of the enormous amount of work that everyone was able to do and able to do joyfully. And so thank you so much for taking us on that 2-year journey with you. And congratulations. I'm so excited to see your quilts hanging in person at QuiltCon in just a couple months. So over now to Dianna.
Okay. I tell you what, that's those were a lot of very tough presentations to follow. So much beautiful work.
I'm so excited about what you're going to share, Dianna.
All right. So I'm one of the fortunate people who just received her graduation certificate. Very excited. I'm Dianna Huxhold, coming to you from the US, from Indiana. I live in a small town named Uniondale, and I live in the northeast part of Indiana. First, I'd like to share with you sort of my making lineage. I was sort of bookended by two creative women. My grandmother, Frances Fedock, was everything crochet and knitting. Doilies for as long as I can remember, scarves, mittens, ponchos back in the day when those were a thing. She was always making, my grandmother, and she's the one who taught me how to. I don't remember how to do it any longer, but how to crochet and knit. My mother, Pauline, this is a piece of hers. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of glare on the picture. The picture is framed, and I didn't want to unframe it, but she did a great deal of all sorts of crafts, really. Everything from, I don't know if you remember, back in the 70s, there was fruit that you would get beads and little sequins and use straight pins and put it in the fruit to create sort of this bedazzled fruit bowl for the center of your table. She did embroidery, and actually toward the end of her life found cross stitch and crocheting, and those became her two loves. And this is a piece that I inherited from her that I love dearly. And then there I am on the right, sort of the cattywampus bit, not following a pattern, but very much enjoying using needle and thread and any fabric I could get my hands on to start making marks. Some of the folks that I've been highly inspired by, and primarily, well, still, but before I made contact with Heidi, Riko Koga, and Junko Oki, Tilke Schwartz. Those folks do incredible needlework, very, I would say, less conventional embroidery than what I grew up with, getting a kit from the Five and Dime, that already had a printed out image of a bear with maybe some blocks, the A, B, and C, and you make a kid's bib. or something along those lines. The work of these three women, it's more about daily life and heavy thread use, and even some written word. So on the back here, you can see this front piece is sort of like a really large placemat. And it has been worked out on, you can see maybe in this picture a little better. This was, I'm an art teacher, trained to be an art teacher, and this was a drop cloth that my students were using to protect the tables right before COVID hit. And this was one of the remnants that I was able to clean out of the classroom and bring home, and started writing on the back, sort of my stream of consciousness, just in ballpoint pen, of all of the frustration and aggravation and feelings of being lost and whatnot during the COVID situation, but was able to obscure some of that material by stitching through it. And also using the stains on the fabric as sort of sources of insight as to what colors I might be able to stitch stitch on top. Whoops. Okay. For whatever reason, there we go. All right. And then also, still before the class, I started to do embroidery that then was starting to join some fabrics together and stitch on top, and that became great fun. Found Jude Hill online, started using some of her ways of folding fabric to put squares together to create larger pieces of cloth to eventually embroider. Jenny Doan from Missouri Star took her, some of her videos in and started learning how to do more of a traditional, I guess, hourglass type block. This was what I was putting together. Never got to finish it for my mother before she passed away. We would meet every Sunday to stitch together. And so I was just sort of pulling little threads, from her mind about what she would like. And oh, if you had a quilt, what would it be, type of thing. Looking at the works that she was making and knowing her favorite colors anyway. So I was putting that together, and that's a piece that I'll be working on here next year. But here we are, the first piece, this piece right here, in response to Ukraine and wishes of peace for Ukraine. I made this really the size of a placemat, my very first quilt, and took the background, folded it over to create the binding for the front, and that was it. And then I met this lovely lady. I online at first was seeing your quilts that really combined, like many of the other folks in class, combined all of the things I was most interested in. Heavy technique of embroidery, learning actually how to do the applique, the storytelling component, even some of the textual component that I was looking for. So when I found your class, like many of the other folks, it's like, so where do you start when it comes to funds? I'm not used to spending money on my own growth. I have to tell you, it was the best money I've spent, honestly. But just that upfront, the little bit of nervousness about that. But this class has been so wonderful. And at the onset, I had several questions. These are just a few. First of all, am I genuinely interested in quilt making, or is it just something that I'm in love with the idea? Am I skilled enough to take the class? What would a quilt made by me look like? What do I make, or why do I make what I make, and do what I do? And how would I build a more sustainable practice if I were to continue? So for the first two questions, yes, I absolutely love quilt making. Love to sew. Had no idea that I would find it such a beautiful, relaxing, meditative sort of practice. Love it. And the idea of being skilled enough, that's an interesting one because I'm a real noob when it comes to making quilts. I mean, my placemat didn't even have, batting on the inside. So I mean, I'm just kind of breaking some rules there. I don't know that I can really call it a quilt. Um, but just the joy of putting the materials together. I think, Heidi, you did such a great job with sort of spiraling the curriculum to meet people where they are. And really, I think of the class as not a how-to, but in terms of like you're going to teach us this technique or whatnot, but more of a thinking like artists and how to become the artists that we're meant to be. Is more of how I would phrase this, the makeup of this class. And you provide us so many on-ramps and meet us where we are and allow us to sort of plot our own course, choose your own adventure, so to speak. This is the first quilt that I made in class with my collaborators. This is how most of my things I've realized get made. If there's not dog hair on it, it's not been loved enough. This quilt, 35 by 45, I made using fabrics that really I'm sitting on a wealth of fabrics. My father, stepdad passed away several years ago. My mom didn't clean out the closet, didn't have a heart to. And then when she passed away, I didn't really have the heart to let go of a lot of her clothing either. So I just spent several evenings deconstructing clothing, including a lot of my own clothing and my partner's clothing, and thought, this is what I'm going to use to make quilts, already storied fabrics. So many of the fabrics that you're seeing on here, I sewed down in pretty much the shape that they were. This is a portion, as you can tell, the tails of a shirt, an armhole section. Not sure what that part's called, but that part from the top part of maybe a yoke, the yoke of a shirt. This is a portion of a pair of shorts that my mom had in her pocket. So this was the largest quilt that I'd made to date, and that happened this year. Here's a detail shot using pearl cotton, allowing the stitches on the back to be exposed, which is something I hadn't seen in quilting until Heidi. I saw it a little bit in some of the embroidery folks that I follow, but not in quilts, and I was really drawn to that. This is the second quilt that I made in class, and this is more of a what would you say, twin size, I guess, quilt. It started out on just a piece of fabric. I was going to make another small piece for the wall, I thought, so that I could kind of get a sense of look at myself in fabric form up on the wall and live with myself that way and try to figure out, so who am I really? What do I like? Well, having two young dogs in the house, oftentimes when I'd lay things on the floor, they would help me compose. And so I'd leave it that way. It's like, well, why not? It's as much their blanket as it is my own. And so many of these pieces were put together just sort of by me and my pups. Here, I realized, oh, it's getting much bigger than I thought it was going to be. Now it's not quite wide enough for a blanket. So I needed to add on another piece of fabric, which I'm hoping you can see okay here. I didn't have any more of this fabric, so I just found something else that I had, sewed it together, and continued the pattern. I left the knots exposed on the front, very interested in the construction process, being seen, and the front and the back being equally as beautiful, at least to my eye. And again, all the pieces on here are scraps, just like they were for, well, scraps. Yeah, I guess they would be considered scraps from the quilt that I'd made prior. And I just turned over I used flannel sheet for the back and then just rolled those edges over to finish the front. So those of you who've done the actual real live binding, good for you. That is so cool. That's one of my next steps. Here's the piece that I'm working on now. I started this piece before the class, but I didn't finish the top. Until this year during class. And I don't know if you can tell here, it's on a banister. This one is my largest one to date. It's more of a full-size quilt top made all out of my partner's shirts that have been loved to bits and no longer able to be used for shirts. Just cut all of those up. He chose a piece of flannel for the back. And so right now it's on the table right next to me here. And I have just started pin basting on this one. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about this. So, one of the other questions is why do I make the quilts that I make? I'm getting some insight into this, and the class was pivotal in helping me have the time and the questioning in the curriculum to start thinking about this. I recognize that with quilts, I used to do some ceramic work years ago. With quilts, it's kind of the same thing. It's the fluidity and the flexibility of the material. But with quilts, it takes it the next step further. I mean, it can be something that's beautiful that's on your wall. It can be something that is utilitarian. It just has a real fluidity in its processes. I love the slow processes, the idea of repetition and meditation, of just kind of intuitively putting pieces together and going with the flow. And the ideas of relationships and place and identity and play, all being sort of central threads. Oops, how come it's doing that? There we go. And then the last one, question that I had is how do I build a more consistent practice? And this year really helped me to consider this and to refine. And I'm sure that for the rest of my life, I'll be refining as life shifts, how to maintain a practice. And so here are a couple of different seating areas in the house where I just keep smaller pieces going so that I can sit down and start working. I'll even keep oftentimes the needles threaded. So when I'm done working for that 10 minutes or hour or whatever it is, I make sure my last thing, it may not be cleaned up and there's probably scraps and threads on the floor. That doesn't matter. I just make sure there's always a needle that's threaded so I can start immediately the next time. Here is my kit that I use for travel. I keep this one in the car. I take it into work. That way I can take whatever I need at that moment and continue working. But also part of the practice is bringing other folks, not only my two little four-legged tornadoes here, but working with kids, inviting them into the practice as well, and asking them to draw pieces and stitch pieces. And so just trying to sew together every aspect of my life so that it's expressed through stitching. And that's what I have for you, folks. Thank you for your time. I tried to go through it quickly.
Dianna, that was so beautiful. Such an incredible note to close on. And, with you, you're a librarian at a school. And so working with those little ones is just amazing to see. And you've been donating some of the quilts as well, right?
Yeah, to Project Linus. So the kids are helping to make quilts that are then going back to kids in need.
Yeah, it's awesome to see you, using that like leadership role with quilting already, like not waiting till you graduate class or have more experience, but just diving in and working with them. And it's really exciting to see. And then also I love that you are, not looking at your dogs and thinking, oh, it's impossible to sew with them in the house, but instead you are completely pivoting that and seeing them as collaborators and able to help you with compositions so that you can keep sewing and working. And the composition in that twin size quilt that you collaborated with them is just so beautiful to me. And I love that they played a role in choosing what got to go where.
Thank
So,
you.
as we look to wrapping up, maybe in the next 20 minutes or so, Michelle did have to depart, but the rest of us are here and happy to answer any questions. So even if you put a question earlier in the chat, it might be a little bit hard to go back and see. So if you've really got a question, please pop that into the chat now. We would love to answer any questions that you've got. It's awesome that Pretty much everybody who logged on at the beginning is still here, continuing to watch. And so if you've got questions, we are happy to answer. It could be questions about their artistic practice. It could be questions about the class. And anything in between is very welcome. And while we're giving folks a chance um, to work on that, another thing that comes up from time to time is hand care and body care, and how do we make sure that our practice is sustainable for our bodies. And so I forgot that Lisa had that gorgeous quilt top lurking with a challenging back on it. And Lisa, I wanted to ask you about that quilt that you shared that has the bed sheet that's tight. Have you basted that quilt all the way around? And you'll have to unmute to be able to answer.
So I don't even know what you mean by basting. Do you mean like the back so that I can make a sandwich?
Yeah, because the back of the sandwich is the bed sheet, or is that?
No.
Oh,
So
you
I
applicate
really
everything
I
through.
applicate onto a bed sheet. So
Ah.
that's why I'm a little bit nervous about like adding
Mhm.
another piece of fabric, although the fabric I usually use is muslin, cotton muslin. It's really
Mhm.
easy to get the needle through, but this is insanely impossible. So
Is it possible to sometimes you can kind of like feel through and pull apart the base that you appliqued to from the pieces of applique? Would it be
yes.
reasonable to pull those apart and then snip around and kind of cut away as much of that backing as possible?
Well, that's a great idea. Yeah, I can do that because you can see, I don't know if you can, but you can see
Mhm.
my stitches. I could cut out a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
Good idea. Because I really want to finish this. I love the colors together, and my idea was to make it into a headboard. So like I would get a piece of plywood for the back of my bed, and I didn't know that I would quilt it, but I would make it fit on top of the plywood, and it would just go behind my bed.
Mm.
So I do want to quilt it though first,
Yeah.
and then do that. Thanks for
Yeah.
that tip. I will try that and I'll report back,
I look
at least to
forward
my
to,
group.
yeah, I really look forward to checking it out and continuing to problem solve. Excellent. So we have a question from Margaret, and she's asking about how much time are we devoting each week, and I would add to that each month to class because she wants to make sure she has enough time available if she's going to consider signing up. And so my short answer, and then I want to pass it over to you all because you know you've done the class. I haven't done the class, so I don't know as much. But from my point of view, we're ideally spending 5 to 7 hours a week sewing, and you've got to do the sewing. It's really hard to show up each month to our small groups and not have sewn anything. So that's really important. You're welcome to sew more than that, but ideally, an average of an hour a day is very helpful amount of sewing to be able to talk about what you've done. And then on a monthly basis, we have the small group meetings that are about 3 hours, and it's important to make those live small group meetings. If on occasion you know you can't make one, maybe someone invited you to a wedding that Sunday and you just can't, it's possible to pre-record a video for us and share it so that we can still see you present and then respond to you, and you can watch the recording of the small group. And when folks are able to make that happen, it's really seamless and easy to be absent, but also you can be absent once in a while. It says on the class description that you can miss 3 of the 12 large small group gatherings. And then the other big time commitment is the learning modules. Those are about 6 hours of content each month. and you can watch those. They are about 3 hours from me and 3 hours from YouTube or PBS or other places where you can watch something. And depending on your learning style, and that's a big if, but you might enjoy watching those while you're quilting. You might be able to watch those while you are like walking on the treadmill or emptying the dishwasher or doing a lot of kind of household activities. That's certainly the kind of thing that I'm often doing when I'm watching that type of video. Um, and then if it's up, if it's your jam, you can even watch them on 2 times speed. You can watch them double fast. And then it's like I'm talking really quickly. So those are the top things is about an hour a day of sewing, the 3 hour live on Zoom meeting, and then the 6 hours of learning module. In addition to that, you've got the optional co-working sessions, which is about 4 hours a month. There are two, usually one's in the early afternoon and one's in the evening to try to hit different time zones. And then there's also your one-on-one opportunity to meet with a fellow student and talk with them. And so then that is certainly over 10 hours a month that you are going to be committing to the class. So I'll hand it over to other folks. How does it feel in terms of time and commitment and ability to engage in class?
I think that's really accurate. The only thing I would add is the first couple presentations take a lot of time to prepare, unless you are already a master at making slides. And I, like the second or third time I was in Japan and trying to do it, and my phone had updated and it made all of my photos be in the wrong format. So I couldn't import any of them into the one program I had to make slides. And I had to figure out, now I know you can just pop them in Studio and they come out as JPEGs. Yay. But then the only way I knew how to do it was to put it on Instagram, and then it would make a copy that was in the right format. Then I would delete the post because I didn't really want it was just so awkward. So at first I was spending 8 hours making my presentations, but that was not true for very long. I got much better at it, and then it was just a couple hours to make a 10-minute presentation. And I don't know, maybe I was just a Luddite and other people would be better at it, but that is another thing. But it's fun work, and it's all, even the time making the presentations, you're really thinking about how the modules apply to you the whole time you're working on that. So
Thank you, Sharron. That's a really great point. Anyone else want to help respond? Dianna.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very doable, and there are some days when I couldn't do an hour that day. Maybe I got 10, 15 minutes in of stitching at lunch, and that's all I could do. Then I would just find another time when maybe I could do a couple hours worth of stitching, to sort of make up for that. But I found actually it was harder to stop oftentimes than it was, to to find the time to make. A lot of other things didn't get done, which I think is sort of a beautiful way of rebalancing and finding my the significance of other activities like vacuuming or, whatever.
That's a huge part of the efficiency in the title of the class as well, is what else can you delete from your life to carve out some sewing time? And Dianna, you were also really great at sometimes it had just been a busy month and you showed up for the small group and you didn't have a slideshow and you were just wonderful at like holding things up, telling the story, sticking to that 10 minutes, making the most of it. Those presentations are for you more than they're for me, the teacher. And so you found really clever ways during some moments that were busy to still have us feel engaged, feel like we knew what you were doing, what you were sewing, but not spending that like 2 or 3 hours to create the 10-minute presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. And that being said, I mean, sometimes you don't get through all of the module information, or I got through it quicker than I'd like to. And so this upcoming year, I get to look forward to revisiting all that material.
Yeah,
It's on
exactly.
giving.
I think the sewing itself is the most important thing to be keeping up with. And if you've only seen half the module, it's really easy to catch up on that later or just say, I didn't see it all, but I'm still here. Okay, awesome. So we have another question from Corey, and they're asking that they love the style of Ben Millett's quilts. And so our quilters like that successful in class. And so I would say Ben Millett took class last year and he did amazing in class. And the first assignment in the aesthetics module spurred him to go to his local art museum and make some quilts that were a nod to Ellsworth Kelly. And he posted them on Instagram. And lo and behold, his local art museum noticed those posts and said, Hey, do you want to have a solo show at the Iowa Des Moines Art Museum? And so he made incredible quilts. It worked out incredibly well. He was a more advanced quilter signing up. He was someone who was already being paid to lecture for quilt guilds and had an established style, but the class was able to push him forward into exploring some other angles of his creativity. And especially, I remember a couple of years prior to that, Ben reaching out to me and us forming a friendship and him saying that he was doing a lot of geometry, but he wanted that meaning piece in the quilts. He wanted more of a conceptual angle and more meaningful things happening in them. And he was really able to do that in class. And he, just did an awesome job sharing about this. And if you go to his blog on his website, you can see some of that history because he did a great job sharing his experience in class in his blog. But I mean, he was fighting cancer that year. And there were a lot of times where he would pre-record a video because he had something for his child or a health appointment. And if his hands were hurting from the treatments, he was instead reading and learning more about, especially doing some big rabbit holes on LGBTQ artists and how are they putting that meaning into their art, and just doing really incredible things in class. And there are several other quilters that we've had. Sarah Campbell in particular she didn't do one of these presentations, but she does a lot of matching corners and bright colors and beautiful quilts. And three she I think she got 3 quilts into QuiltCon. Otherwise, maybe it's 4. But I think it's 3 that she got into QuiltCon this coming year. And they're just beautiful, sharp angles, bright colors, measured points. And I am so proud of her. And she fit in with the group in class so well. And we really treasured having her and that style of quilting in class. So absolutely, yes. I am so happy for people to just find their voice and make the kind of quilts that they love to make. And that style is as welcome as any other style. All right. And then Sharron had to head out, which is totally fine. So if I'm missing any other questions, let me know. And I know we've got a couple of alums in the group who are here, and I see Marie France with her hand raised, so I'm going to add a spotlight. Hi.
Hi. Now I'll have to figure out how to withdraw my hand in a minute. 2 points, I guess, to the 2 last questions. For those who are definitely taking the class, I would say get onto the modules, the first module very quickly, because that's a very dense module when you're thinking about your aesthetics. And maybe this is not the case for everyone, but that I took tons of time on, not just because it was like, again, how to import the bloody photos into the slideshow, but it was also, it becomes really easy once you know how. But it was also a lot of thinking and thinking. And of course, it's overwhelming, those first, that first kind of idea of presenting yourself. And I think taking lots of time to think about what you want to put in there is a very useful thing to do. And the second point, about the person who said, are you welcome if you do brightly colored geometric? I think our year, I don't know about the current year, but I have the feeling that this current year's aesthetic might be more less obviously varied than our year was. I remember in our class, people were doing all kinds of different things, and everything was appreciated. We valued each other's works, we valued each other's aesthetics, and I think this class is very much about finding what you like and what you want to do, rather than, well, I'm going to make a quilt that looks exactly like Heidi's. Of course, it's never going to be as good because, I'm not Heidi. So I think that's a very, I think that was very helpful, knowing you do you. Only perhaps now you're more thoughtful about how you're going to do you, maybe.
Yeah, and Marie France, I really appreciate what you said about getting a head start. And also, in January, our very first small group gathering, that is just an introduction. So that is not, here's what I learned about my aesthetic, everyone. So on January 11th and 12th, you will have to figure out how to make a little PowerPoint, and I have some demos on how to do that in Keynote and Google Slideshow and PowerPoint. And in that module, you're just introducing yourself. You're saying, hi, I'm Heidi. I signed up for class. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've done some sewing before. I haven't done much sewing before. This is who I am. And so then during that time, you're watching the aesthetics module so that then in early February, when we meet for our small group, that's when you're giving that first presentation that is reflecting on the learning that's happened in a module. And so, especially for folks who are thinking about signing up, now we've got 8 spots available still. And so for those 8 of you who are signing up now, you've got some time to make all of that happen in a timely fashion. And yeah, and Marie France, actually, I believe you signed up after Christmas when you joined class. So you've got that firsthand experience that it can be done with that later timeline. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think that may be right. It was really last
Okay.
minute. Oh, shall I do it? Shall I do it? Shall I do it? Shall I do it? And no regrets. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, and I see we've got a couple new. Oh, no, Jane, you are not late. So you've signed up, you're in the class, but you haven't done the modules yet. That is totally fine, but I have been stirring the pot lately. My assistant Kat and I have been making sure that people have found their welcome email and that then they click both links. One link takes them to the quilt making class in general, and the other link takes them to the 2026 cohort specifically. And that's where the recordings of our small groups live. But you want to make sure you're also getting into the quilt making group, and that's where you have the studio community and the learning modules. And so you're able to take a look at a lot of that introductory material. You also are able to start joining us for co-working sessions. In fact, we have one of them happening tonight at 7 p.m. Central. So if you follow those links from the welcome email, that would be sent from Heidi Parkes info@gmail.com, not my usual email. But if you look for your welcome email from that, you'll be able to make sure you get onto the whole Mighty Network and can access the co-working sessions and the module information, but you'll be just fine that you haven't already investigated all of those yet. And then Corey says, I tend to be drawn to quilts in a, oh, sorry, I already saw that. Okay, excellent. Well, everyone, thank you so much for, okay. So Margaret, where can we learn all the details and sign up? So I will put another link into the chat for that. Here we go. And of course, on YouTube, the link will be at the very top, the link to sign up. So on my website, if you go to the shop, you will find the very first top left item in the shop is Quiltmaking 2026. And so the link's on YouTube, and I've just now put the link into the chat here as well. That outlines the entire class and is the space where you sign up. And the class this upcoming year in 2026 is meeting at 3 different times. So when you sign up, you want to choose your small group with the time that you meet. And so we've got 3 spots available in the group that meets on Sunday at noon. We've got 3 spots available in the group that meets on Mondays at 11 a.m. And then we've got 2 spots available in the group that meets on Mondays at 7 p.m. And all those times are in Central Time. So like we've got our Australian is in the 7 p.m. group, which is going to be very helpful for her. And so that's how you would sign up and see all of the details in the small group there. And just want to make sure I'm reading everything. Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone, very, very much. If you are curious about class, if, like some of these people here, you're on the fence, should I, shouldn't I? Do I have enough experience? Do I have the time? Send me an email or a direct message on Instagram. I would be delighted to help you, feel out if it's going to be a good fit for you. And thank you so much for watching. Also on the YouTube recording, as well as on the blog post from my website that you used to sign up for class, I've linked the Instagram accounts for everybody that you saw here, so you'll be able to follow Dianna and Alison and Cynthia and Sharron and everybody else who was presenting. So thank you very, very much.